Alright, hello. This is the first cron guide that I've ever recorded. This is a very informal guide on how to use the ReaEQ VST Equaliser. This video is not going to be covering installation. I will link in the description to sort of the go-to source for installing this plugin if you're interested in using it. But once you have it installed, this guide is more of just a personal guide for myself on how to use the tool, and I thought it might be helpful for other people for figuring out how these different tools work in this plugin. So to start things off, you're going to have bands, which are basically little nodes here that will let you play with different parts of the sound. The first band is low tones, so this is kind of like the lowest part of my voice, and then 2 is an even higher frequency, and then 3 is kind of the core frequency of the voice for the higher tones. You can add additional bands if you'd like to get fancy with the sound, but I've found that 4, for me personally, is enough. And you can add those bands just down here by using the add band option. So one thing I'd like to start off by going over is how you modify bands, because that's really how you kind of shape and sculpt your sound. One important principle to note here is that there are kind of preset types that you can apply to your bands. The most important concept here are passes and shelves. Now, this gets really, really technical if you're an audio professional, which I'm not. This is kind of a layman's explanation. A pass is basically a twice as effective modifier as a shelf, and both of these modifiers cut out certain sounds from a frequency. So, for example, if I switch this to a high shelf for the lowest frequencies, it's going to allow higher pitch sounds to come in on this frequency, whereas if I apply a more effective high pass, it's going to be cutting out higher pitched noises from the low frequency of my voice. So that's kind of a basic concept you can use to start to shape sounds. Now, in order to actually shape or sculpt your audio, as it were, this is basically what you're doing here, is sculpting the curve to influence how your audio sounds. You need to either have some kind of a modifier on the band, like a type, so like a high pass or a high shelf, low shelf, or low pass. In order to have any sort of shape on the curve, you need to have a modifier on the band. And in addition, you can see here, this is just a standard band, so there's no modifier on this band, but I've actually affected the gain here a little bit. So if I switch this gain to 0, and then I play around with the bandwidth, you'll notice that there's no impact here at all, right? Like the number is not moving, the shape of the audio, for all intents and purposes, is not changing because there's no modifier on the band. But if we go here and add again our -2 gain to this particular band and shift the bandwidth around, you'll notice that the curve is moving slightly because there is a modifier on the band. This same principle applies if you apply something like a high pass. And just as a fun note here, actually, if you apply a high pass to the second band, you actually get kind of a radio effect. I'll do that right now. So we've gone and applied a high pass, and you'll probably notice there's almost no bass in my voice anymore because we're effectively canceling that out, and it almost sounds like an old school radio or communicator or some type of a phone if you apply that effect, which is kind of cool. But not exactly what we're going for here. So I'm going to switch this back to band now. And so I just wanted to show that principle. So you know what this frequency slider does. It's actually not a modifier, it just adjusts which part of the frequency you're going to be playing with. So I want to actually have that set to 300, so that doesn't really count as a modifier, but if you do want to sculpt the audio with the bandwidth, you will need to have either a gain or one of the preset types of modifiers applied to your audio. Now, I've already kind of gone over that number 1 is your low tones and 4 is the highest pitched noises. I've found personally that applying a high pass on number 1 helps to reduce sounds like this. I'm going to hit my desk, just like that. It helps to make it so that the reverb from hitting the desk like that, or the shock, it doesn't cause as much of an impact on the microphone. And similarly, on the fourth band here, this is going to be really unpleasant to listen to, just as a forewarning, but you can test out how your fourth band works by kind of hissing into your microphone, kind of like this. So like s, 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 s. You'll know that you've done a good job of shaping your fourth band if when you're hissing into your microphone, it isn't completely ear piercing and it isn't causing any peaking on your audio reader. That's really what you're going for. And so what I've done on this one is apply a low pass to band 4 to kind of shape the audio to cut out the most intense high frequency noises to make sure that those aren't coming through on the microphone. And so now we're getting into kind of how you should be aiming to set up your microphone, and this is where people talk about it's completely different for everyone's voice, and also it's different based on people's setups. So you can see here that you can see what my voice looks like here, and what you're trying to do really is balance out how your voice sounds. So you'll notice on band 3, for example, I've applied a small amount of gain, because on this audio reader you can see that frequency 3 it's a lot quieter than the bass in my voice. The bass in my voice on band 2 is very, very loud, and kind of my midtones they're not as pronounced. So I wanted to put some amplification onto that to help balance out the curve of the sound. Now, this is not professionally done, and you can play around with this probably to accomplish a greater effect than I've done here. There's probably audio professionals out there that would watch this and cringe at the way I have this set up. But really the base concept here is giving you the flexibility that you need to play around with this for yourself to achieve a desired result. So again, I've applied a little bit of gain on band 3. Now, the thing is, the distance from your microphone plays a huge role in balancing out these audio levels. If you have a professional setup and your microphone is very, very close to your face from something like a holding arm, you'll need to work with your audio a lot less because your voice is going to be getting transmitted directly into the microphone. In contrast, if you have a setup like mine, where the microphone is kind of far away from your face, you may need to add a significant amount of gain to some frequencies so that they're pronounced despite your distance away from the microphone. And so based on that last note, keep in mind that too much gain will actually make your audio sound very scratchy and artificial. I'll do that here on purpose now. I'm actually going to up the gain on band 3 from 2.5 to 4.5. Now, I'm not sure how pronounced this is going to be on the recording. We could even do something like a 6.5 here. You'll notice that it starts to sound really, really bad because it's just adding so much artificial noise just to pick up my voice. If we bring that back down to a more modest 2.5, it'll sound a lot more natural. So basically what you're going for here on applying gain to any of your bands is trying to apply the smallest amount of gain that you possibly can while still achieving a desired frequency amplification. And that's something you really need to play with based on how far away the microphone is from your face, and from your mouth rather. But yeah, and just one more small note also, if you want to, you can apply negative gain to a band as well if you want to make it less pronounced. And by applying a negative gain, that does count as a modifier, and you will be able to, as we can see, shift the bandwidth around to kind of shape the audio in different ways. So this, again, it's not a professional guide by any means, and a lot of this stuff is over my head. But after a lot of playing around and experimentation, I was able to kind of find a way to at least play around with the audio in different ways to kind of shape it and get different desired effects. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. I'll likely be reviewing this myself in the future when I go to set this up if I'm in a different recording environment, because again, knowing how to kind of do this on the fly if you do work in different locations is quite helpful. But yeah, I hope that was helpful, and I will see you for another guide in the future.